if we told you the events of Star Wars Jedi Survivor can all be traced back to one moment in the Star Wars timeline? Let's turn the clock all the way back to the High Republic era and the year 232 BBY, where one singular moment is about to change the course of the High Republic era and spark a butterfly effect, ultimately culminating with the events and consequences of the story of Jedi Survivor. That moment is the Great Hyperspace Disaster.
It all started when the Legacy Run, a Class A freight transport ship, was traveling through hyperspace along a well-established hyperspace route. Out of nowhere, an obstacle suddenly appeared in the middle of the hyperlane, giving the ship's captain a moment's notice to avoid impact. In a split second, that object collided with the Legacy Run, causing the ship to tear itself apart. Unbeknownst to the starship's crew, the obstacle was a Nihil storm ship traversing a hyperspace path. Hyperspace paths were routes through hyperspace that were thought to have been impossible according to conventional navigational systems of the era. However, the Force-sensitive hyperspace prospector Mary Santeca had a unique ability that allowed her to discover and locate these irregular routes. Due to this ability, Santeca was kidnapped by the Rowe family so that they could gain the ability to use and take control of the paths. With the family having controlled the paths for generations, Asgar Rowe utilized the paths after taking control of the Nihil, providing the Nihil with paths to undertake operations. The Nihil vessels were then eventually equipped with path engines, devices that translated the paths into usable navigational data.
Now, you might be asking yourself, how did a Nihil ship traveling through a hyperspace path travel at just the right speed at just the right moment to collide with the Legacy Run? While this might seem like an unlikely freak accident, it turns out that the impact was entirely calculated by the Nihil. The Nihil storm ship that impacted the Legacy Run was intentionally set on its course by Marchion Ro, the leader of the Nihil, who held the title the Eye of the Nihil. But why would the Nihil manufacture such a catastrophe? Well, it's simple: to cause chaos. In that regard, the Nihil caused more chaos than they could have imagined. The Legacy Run, having been torn apart in hyperspace, led to a series of disasters in the aftermath of the Great Hyperspace Disaster. These would become to be known as the Emergences. These disastrous events were caused by fragments of the wreckage of the Legacy Run falling out of hyperspace and colliding with terrestrial bodies at near light speed. The first emergence occurred in the Abdalis system, where around 20 million people were killed after the planet of Abdalis was struck by one of these fragments. These emergences continued to happen randomly throughout the Outer Rim territories, leading to Chancellor So temporarily prohibiting hyperspace travel throughout large portions of the Outer Rim until a task force could contain the situation.
In the aftermath of the Great Hyperspace Disaster, the Nihil, who were responsible for the catastrophe, began to go on the offensive against the Galactic Republic and the Jedi Order, because the Nihil believed the expanding Republic threatened their way of life and encroached on their people's freedom. The Nihil began to engage in acts of terror throughout the Republic frontier that led to the deaths of thousands. This led to a conflict breaking out between the Galactic Republic and the Nihil, which saw the Nihil destroy the Valo Republic Fair, destroy the Republic's hallmark station, Starlight Beacon, and prevent the Galactic Republic from being able to reach 10 full sectors of the Outer Rim, allowing the Nihil to claim that territory for themselves. During this conflict with the Galactic Republic and the Jedi Order, in the aftermath of the Great Hyperspace Disaster, the Nihil launched a surprise attack on the planet Tanalorr, which had been discovered by Jedi Master Dagan Gera, who intended to use the planet as a bastion of the Jedi Order and a home to construct the new Jedi Temple. Despite a spirited defense by the Jedi, led by Jedi Master Dagan Gera and Jedi Council member Oppo Rancisis, the Nihil were eventually able to overwhelm the Jedi's defenses.
Eventually, the Jedi Council gave the order to abandon Tanalorr, which enraged Gera and served as a main catalyst to his eventual betrayal of the Order. Now, how the Nihil discovered Tanalorr remained a mystery to the Jedi Council since the planet was hidden behind the daunting Koboh Abyss. Under the belief and fear that the Nihil must have obtained one of the Abyss compasses created by Jedi Master Centauri Khri, which were the only known devices capable of navigating the deadly Koboh Abyss, the Jedi Council ordered the destruction of all of the compasses. This decision enraged Gera and made him both fall to the dark side and turn his back on the Jedi, murdering several of his fellow knights in a rage over their destruction. Eventually, he returned to Khri on the moon of Koboh, who tried to return him to the light while holding him back from claiming one of the last remaining compasses. However, consumed by his obsession with Tanalorr, Gera ignored her pleas and lashed out for the compass. Khri, igniting her lightsaber, severed Gera's right arm, rendering him unconscious. Centauri called for a medical droid, and Gera was then placed into a bacta tank in the Forest Array's rehabilitation wing on the planet of Koboh to be held in stasis for the foreseeable future, as she intended for Gera to be given a second chance at life. Nevertheless, Gera felt betrayed by the person he trusted most.
The Nihil's galactic terrorism, including their attack on Tanalorr and the Great Hyperspace Disaster, didn't just cause Gera to turn against the Jedi Order. The Nihil also caused everlasting effects on the Koboh system itself. At some point, an emergence caused by the Great Hyperspace Disaster occurred over the planet of Koboh, shattering the planet's moon. This emergence also resulted in the Jedi on Koboh either perishing in that disaster or evacuating the planet entirely. The Order's widespread evacuation of Koboh caused Gera to be left behind and forgotten in the bacta tank in the Forest Array. Gera remained undisturbed for decades until none other than Jedi Knight Cal Kestis stumbles upon him and releases him from the tank. Thus, the Great Hyperspace Disaster and its aftermath directly led to the events and consequences of the entire story of Jedi Survivor.